What's going on, everybody? And welcome into the 135th episode of the Crazy One podcast. As always, I'm your host, Stephen Gates, and this is the show where we talk about creativity, leadership, design, and a whole bunch of other stuff that matter to creative people. Now, as always, look, if you like the show, if you're listening to the show, do me a favor, leave a review. Let people know what you like about the show. Tell a friend, put it on a billboard, put it on a sticker, write it on a bathroom stall, whatever you want to do. But things like that always helps me to let me know that people are actually listening to the show. So with the episode today, this is something that I think has been on my mind probably for a couple of years now, and I haven't really talked about. Because one of the things that, look, I've experienced it. I talk to people probably every single week that are in all different levels of seniority that are like, Steve, look, what's going on with the market, right? What's going on with hiring? And I think, look, we've already talked about just, again, it feels like right now things are starting to swing away from design a little bit. We're probably seeing across the board salaries are about 20 to 30% lower than where they were. But I think especially if you're in one of the more senior positions, right? I think this is where I just have so many conversations lately. And some of these conversations are people will come to me and say, look, do you think I'm just too old? Like, do I not know what I'm doing? Is it like ageism where they just want to hire younger people? Is it that I'm too expensive and did I sort of miss what I think my value is? And do I need to value myself differently? And I had this conversation with myself whenever I went through my interview process that ultimately led to me starting my own studio, where it just felt like something was different. And it took me a lot of interviews and probably some months to even, I think, finally put my finger on what I think is going on. And I'd be fascinated to hear from you guys around what you think about this. I don't think it's ageism. I think there's probably some question of value. But what I think is actually going on with so many companies right now is what I would call experience-ism. I think the first thing I need to do is to figure out how the hell to spell experience-ism. But here's what I'm thinking, is that I think for a lot of companies out there, they don't want people that actually have a lot of experience. Or maybe it's opinionism, personalityism, because I think in a lot of ways what you see is that right now, if you believe a lot of the polls that are out there, somewhere north of 70% of people aren't loving their job. And I think that as a byproduct of that, a lot of people are like, look, I just want to come in, I want to do my job, I want to just meet whatever it is I need to meet so that I can hit my big five or my bonus and just keep it moving on down the road. The number that I think is even crazier in that is allegedly up to like 20-some% of people are actually so frustrated that they are actually actively trying to sabotage their employer, which is nutty to me. But here's the thing, right? So if most people are just going in, and I think that, one of the saddest things that I hear so much is that, look, even from so many creatives, right? It's just that they're not really looking for fulfillment in their work anymore. They've given up on that, right? It's just, they're more afraid of, am I going to keep my job or do I have a backup plan or things like that? So I think that what I'm seeing in a lot of people that I talk to is they don't want somebody who's going to be able to come in and sort of say, look, that works, that doesn't. That person knows what they're talking about, that person's full of shit, right? Like, because I think if you have a certain level of experience, you can bring that in and be able to look at everything and say, okay, this works, that doesn't, different things like that. And I think whenever you do that, you're the savior to some people and you're the devil to others. And I just think right now, a lot of people just don't want the headache, right? They don't want the friction. They don't want somebody who's going to come in and want to do things differently. I think a lot of companies just want you to ship or hit a deadline or make it pretty or do whatever it is. And this idea that it's anything more than that, or that you would, honestly, almost inspire people to more than that. It feels to me like that's just not something that's wanted right now. And I think that's what I mean whenever I say experience-ism, is just, if you're going to come in and tell people that things are going to get better, that design will have a bigger role, that there can be a bigger impact, but that means we're going to need to make some changes or do things differently. And look, I think if I'm being honest, I think it's a little bit understandable on some companies' part, because we just went through an era where you saw every company bought into design thinking and got expensive design leaders, and didn't really make the changes for any of that stuff to work, but I think then looked at that and kind of went like, okay, that didn't work, and then the pendulum swings the other way. And that right now it probably is a little bit more of a push towards creativity as a service, not as actually something that's impactful. Now, as we all know, the companies that continue to be successful, the companies that everybody continues to admire, do not think about things this way, that they want to encourage that sort of dialogue. But I think that seems to be in so many of the conversations that I've had, and even going back to the interviews that I did, that was the part where everybody's eyes sort of glazed over. It was that moment when I wasn't just going to come in and do what everybody else did, where it wasn't just, okay, I'm going to come in and just take orders blindly, that I might challenge things, or I might, again, actually be looking for, I don't know what, enjoying my work, having fun at work, doing things like that. That seemed to just be a bridge too far. So that's the thing that I would say to think about, right? I think if you're somebody that's going out there that you're interviewing, if you feel like maybe you're too old, maybe you're out of touch, maybe your skills are something that are a little bit misaligned. And again, I literally had a conversation today about this, that I think it's just we're really in a spot right now where they aren't really looking for, it's so weird to say, right? Like how are we in a world or in a place where it feels like experience is a liability? And I think that was probably my biggest takeaway whenever I went through and I was doing my interviewing, was at the end of that, I felt like the fact that I'd worked in different places, or I'd worked on big teams and small teams, and I had all this experience, was a liability. And that's super, super weird, because wouldn't you think that's what companies would want? Wouldn't you think they'd want to get better? Wouldn't you think they'd want to actually walk the talk that they all do? But I think that's it for me, right? Is I think that just we're in a spot right now where for too many companies and too many jobs, experience just feels like a liability. And I think this is something for you to think about whenever you're interviewing, whenever you're talking to different companies, when you're figuring out what's next for you. Are you going to be okay working at some place where it's just the status quo and you sort of go in and you do whatever you need to do and, take the paycheck and go home? Or are you going to want more? I think especially knowing that wanting more, which again seems so crazy, that if you want a company that actually, thinks about people and doesn't view them as just resources, if you want to be able to be, satisfied in your job or things like that in a real way, right? Not in the lip service way that every company does, but that's going to be the thing. And, look, these eras can't last forever. And look, I've worked at this long enough that I've seen this cycle of there's an economic downturn, they make changes, they get rid of marketing, they get rid of design, they scale back on all this stuff. Experience becomes a liability, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, right? Like our product isn't very good. We're losing market share. Nobody knows our brand anymore, and then they hire all those people back, usually for more money. So these eras don't last forever, but I think that this one does feel a little bit different, as there is so much friction still between an office and remote and experience versus just doing your job and a lot of these sort of things. But this feels like one of those things that, to me, not a lot of people are talking about or maybe raising, that it feels like that might actually be the undercurrent of what's going on. And I think that for so many of us, that's where we're struggling. And I think that's where I felt personally so lost and disconnected, because all of a sudden it felt like everything that I'd spent my entire career building, everything that I thought had value, everything that I thought would make me valuable, suddenly felt like a liability. And it's not, right? In the long term, it's not. To the right company, it's not. But I think it's just know that we're going to have to pull the signal from the noise on a lot of this sort of stuff to be able to show the value and wait for a lot of that to come back around a little bit. But I think, I don't know, if you're going through this, if you feel like maybe this is what it is you're seeing, like, leave a comment, reach out. I'd love to be able to kind of hear if this is something that is just my perspective and maybe I'm missing something. But I think for those of you that are going through it, maybe you can feel like you're not alone. Maybe you feel like this is something that actually is sort of going on more, or that this is a weird trend around that. But I don't know. I just wanted to share my thought on that. And this is going to be a short, quick episode. But I just think for me, it's something that's really been on my mind. It's something that's a theme of too many conversations that I've been having lately. And just felt like something I wanted to share and get your thoughts on. So, look, I think as always, you enjoy the show, leave a review, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. We're going to go into some of the things I touched on here today in a little bit more upcoming episodes, so stay tuned for that. And hey, don't ever apologize for being experienced, and ever apologize for having an opinion. It's what makes us all great and produces great work. So, as always, hey, stay crazy.